Ridge Channel 8, keeping you informed on events in your community.
Good evening. I would like to call the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission meeting for August 16th, 2012 to order, please. May I get a roll call of members?
Ann Brinkman, Ellen Batman,
Present.
Monica Duran,
Present.
Tracy Gilner, Dick Matthews, here. Scott Ohm,
Here.
Steve Thames,
Here.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I move to approve the order of the agenda.
I second the motion.
Call for a vote, please.
Approved unanimously.
I move to approve the minutes of the July 19th, 2012 meeting.
I second.
Call for a vote, please.
Approved 5-1 with Commissioner Bucknam abstaining, or voting no, I'm sorry. Abstaining, okay.
The next item on the agenda is the public forum, a time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on the agenda. And it appears that we have no one, so we will move on. We do have 3 public hearings tonight, and even though they're in the same property, same group of properties, we do have a specific order to hear these in. So we have first case number MS-12-02, an application filed by the City of Wheat Ridge for a 5-lot consolidation plat for property zoned public facilities, PF, and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue. And we'll be happy to have a presentation from staff.
Alrighty, good evening. Thank you, Commissioner Timms, for that introduction. I do just want to preface, so we'll be looking at the consolidation plat right now first, and then my second presentation will cover the variance and plan building group together. And I also just briefly want to introduce my colleagues, Meredith Reckert, Senior Planner, and also with us tonight is Tim Peranto, Director of the Public Works Department, here to help answer questions. He's much more familiar with the use of the property than I am. So for the record, Lauren Michalak, Planner. Can you hear me? It sounds really echoey. Is this okay? Lauren Michalak, Planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department, presenting case number MS-1202, request for approval of a 5-lot consolidation for properties owned public facilities and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue. And I would like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the subdivision regulations, the zoning ordinance, and this digital presentation. Property is within the City of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met. Planning Commission does have jurisdiction to hear this case. Alright, so we'll start with the zoning map. The subject site is outlined here in blue, located at West 45th Avenue. You see on the right side of your screen between Pearson and Quayle Streets. North is to the top. The current zoning on the property is public facilities, and that's indicated by that blue shade. It's a zone district that provides for public and quasi-public facilities and uses. Surrounding properties include a variety of designations, zoning designations. R2 in the top left corner, that's a single 2-family zone district. Agricultural to the northeast, and then a smattering of residential, agricultural, and commercial to the south of the property. The neighborhood is really primarily semi-rural and residential land uses. And the site is commonly referred to as the Wheat Ridge Maintenance Facility, and for a long time it's been used as the Public Works operations center. Even before the city was incorporated, the county was using it for that purpose. So it's been a fixture in that area for a while. And the commission may recall that in March, you reviewed a zone change request to rezone that northern portion to public facilities. That's clearly been approved as indicated by the updated zoning map, and tonight we're hearing the follow-up requests related to the expansion of the use of this facility. So first is this consolidation plat. Here's an aerial of the property, and you can see the existing buildings. Those internal blue lines indicate the existing interior lot lines. The site's expanded gradually over time, so we have several parcels that make up the 5-acre site. All 5 acres are city-owned. All 5 parcels are city-owned. The north and western parcels have both been subdivided before, and you see those subdivision names, Pumpkin Patch and Hall. The middle portion has never been platted as a part of any subdivision. So the request that we're looking at now is to approve a consolidation plat to remove those interior blue lines and leave the single contiguous exterior boundary. Just a quick refresher, as the commission is aware, there's several different types of subdivision plats and different types of review procedures. So when more than 2 lots are involved in a consolidation, it requires planning commission review. And in this case, you're the final authority because there's no right-of-way dedication occurring. And as a quick reminder, this plat is really strictly related to the configuration of the property lines, so it doesn't affect zoning, doesn't affect permitted uses, doesn't affect design or impacts as a site development. That's something, again, that we'll look at later tonight. So here's an incredibly reduced copy of the consolidation plat. I know it's not legible, but the important part is in the middle. The red line indicates the exterior boundary that will remain if the consolidation is approved. There are 2 easements being created by the plat. Hopefully you can see the colors. This skinny green line indicates an irrigation easement, which is formalizing the location of an existing ditch lateral. And the wider blue line is the location of a water line easement, and that was requested by the water and fire districts when we sent this application on referral to them, and it will provide for a future extension of water lines that will cross the site and connect 45th and 46th Avenue. As a part of the review, as I just mentioned, the application was sent on referral and there were no real substantive comments. Everyone conserved the property, and we did provide the water easement that was requested by the fire and water districts. The Zoning and Development Code includes regulations for the preparation of a final plat, and staff does conclude that the proposed consolidation plat meets those requirements of the subdivision regs, and all agencies can serve the property. So for that reason, staff is recommending approval of the consolidation plat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about this portion or this case.
Thank you for that presentation. Since the city is also the applicant in this case, are there any additional comments needed from the Public Works Director on this application that you want to address now?
No, it's straightforward. All we're trying to do at this point is go ahead and do what we think is the right thing to do and get this consolidated into one lot. It's it can be operated and used the way it is currently configured in land ownership, but it just makes a lot of sense to take care of that now, and this way it'll be one lot in the future for any uses the city might have of it.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll take questions in from the Commission. Commissioner Earl, any questions tonight? Okay, Commissioner Duran? Commissioner Matthews? Commissioner Buckman? Weaver? Okay. I have no questions as well, so thank you for that presentation.
I move to approve case number MS-12-02, a request for approval of a 5-lot consolidation plat on property zoned public facilities and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue for the following reasons. All requirements of Article 4 of the Zoning and Development Code have been met.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? Okay, I'll call for a vote then.
easily.
Very good. Thank you.
For the prompting.
So the next two cases will be heard concurrently. So the next case, number WA-12-11, an application filed by the City of Wheat Ridge in conjunction with case number MS-12-02 for approval of a 76% variance from the landscape requirements for shrubs, reducing the total number of shrubs on the site to 104 on property zoned Public Facilities PF and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue. And then the case number C is case number PBG-12-01, an application filed by the City of Wheat Ridge for a planned building group to allow construction of several principal buildings on the lot in order to implement the master plan for the city maintenance facility for property zoned Public Facilities PF and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue. So with that, staff.
Thanks. Again, for the record, Lauren Michalak, Planner, City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. I would like to enter into the public record the contents of both case files, WA-12-11 and PBG-12-01, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, this digital presentation. Property is within Wheat Ridge again. Posting and publication requirements have been met, and Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case. I want to start with a little bit of context. I know that administratively we don't typically review a lot of planned building groups, and the Planning Commission doesn't typically review a PBG document. So I want to explain the purpose of that document. First, most properties in Wheat Ridge have one primary structure for each one parcel, so a one-to-one relationship. And when a group of buildings is proposed for a single parcel, we require a site plan review. And we call that type of site plan review a planned building group, or a PBG, and it's a tool that really allows a little bit more flexible development and also ensures better use of the site by considering access and site design and parking and landscaping up front instead of piecemeal with each primary building. All PBGs with more than 4 main structures are reviewed by Planning Commission, so you will be the final authority on this application. And ultimately, an approved planned building group, whether it's approved by the Commission or administratively, gets recorded with the county. Because the consolidation plat was just approved, the subject site is now a single parcel with many primary buildings on it, and no additional structures can be built until this planned building group or a planned building group is approved. So we'll launch right into that document. I want to walk through the site plan portion of the PBG that was proposed. The site plan was really largely informed by a 2004 master plan effort by the Parks and Public Works departments, which recommended consolidating their operations at our maintenance facility. And that consolidation is going to result in the need for several new buildings to provide storage for equipment, new offices, storage for materials and vehicles. And this image is showing the PBG site plan overlaid on the aerial, and those red lines are indicating the right-of-way boundaries for the existing public streets. This is a good opportunity to look at access to the site, which really isn't proposed to change at all from the way that it's currently configured. Primary access comes off of West 45th Avenue over on the right side of the screen. And you can see that 45th dead ends into the property. And this is the main entrance to the site, though not a very public entrance. It's gated and has restricted access after hours. 46th Avenue on the west side also dead ends into the property, but this access will really only be emergency purposes, used for emergency purposes. It's gated all the time. There are several buildings that are existing and proposed to stay. Those are highlighted in blue. The planned building group that you're reviewing shows the full build-out scenario. So implementation is going to be phased over the next many years, we anticipate, based on funding and need. And in the long-term vision, these 5 structures will likely remain. So we have the, the salt barn, one of the police storage buildings, a garage, the existing fueling canopy is in the center of the screen, and then on the north here is storage for de-icing fluid. So I'm going to go through each proposed phase of implementation. The first phase, now up on the northern portion of the site, highlighted in blue. This northern portion is entirely vacant right now. And these 4 structures will serve the Parks Department and will allow them to move a lot of their equipment and vehicles, trucks, lawnmowers to this site. All perimeter landscaping in this portion will accompany the construction of the first building, which is likely going to be the middle building, A, if you can see the labels. Will also include improvements for the detention pond, which is in the northeast corner, with that first building. And you can see highlighted in yellow is the parking area. That's the largest open surface parking lot. It'll be used for employees and also sort of standard sized city vehicles. Phase 2 is going to be the administration building, now highlighted in blue and closer to the entrance over on West 45th Avenue. That is proposed to be a 2-story structure located, as I mentioned, by the entrance, and it will allow the Parks and Public Works offices to be consolidated, or the operations offices to be consolidated in one location. And again, adjacent landscaping on the east side right here will be installed once that building's constructed. Phase 3 will be replacement of the vehicle maintenance shops in the middle of the site. And then, as you can imagine, those first 3 phases could take a while. So the remainder of the buildings, which are mostly open or 3-sided storage buildings, the phasing and scheduling of the remaining structures will be determined sort of once we get through those first 3 phases. With each of those new buildings, particularly on the southern property or southern perimeter of the property, the landscaping will be installed as the adjacent buildings are constructed. So I do have a few pictures of the site. I know it's not the most easy property to access. This is an existing garage in the southeast corner, and this building's proposed to remain. And it's a good example of the architectural style that's out there right now and is proposed for the future buildings. You can see horizontal siding, pretty simple style, gable roof, asphalt shingles. This is the existing shops building in the middle of the site. This one would be replaced eventually by a new shops building, but again, you see horizontal siding, gable roof. This sort of treatment of these buildings is not typical for heavy commercial, and they're not particularly notable from an architectural standpoint, but we do feel like they are fairly consistent with sort of that residential and semi-rural neighborhood and the types of buildings that are out there. I should point out that the administration building, which is that 2-story, essentially office building, that will have a different architectural treatment. It will need to meet the building standards or the design standards for an office building that are dictated in the city's architectural and site design manual. A couple more pictures. The existing salt barn on the right side of your screen, more of a barn-style building. Open storage, sheltering some heavy trucks and equipment. Again, just typical structures existing and proposed. This is the gas canopy. That won't be moving because there are underground tanks in that area. And you can see on the right side of your screen a shed roof, which would again be maybe employed for some of the new structures. And one last picture looking to the north. This is the vacant parcel that would be developed as part of Phase 1. And this also shows the 6-foot privacy fence that actually encircles the entire property. So with the exception of that entrance from West 45th Avenue, there's really no public visibility into the property. Like the consolidation plat, we sent this on referral. We actually sent them together to utility companies and service agencies. And again, the only substantial comments related to the water lines. And we did meet with Valley Water and Arvada Fire, and the plan is to extend those water lines when the administration building is constructed. There's really not a lot of water use for the existing storage buildings, but when the office building goes in, we will need to extend those lines, put a new tap, and also add an additional fire hydrant in the site. And as we mentioned in the beginning, this planned building group application is accompanied by a variance request. The zoning code does have requirements for landscaping, and the way that it groups use categories as far as landscaping is single and two-family residential, multifamily residential, and non-residential. So an office building on Wadsworth is in the same category as a maintenance facility, embedded with no public street frontage. In this case, for non-residential development, the code requires 20% of the property to be landscaped. With a 5-acre site, that's a full acre of landscaping, and that is provided primarily through the 15-foot wide landscape buffer that goes around the entire perimeter of the site. The zoning code also includes ratios to determine the minimum number of required trees and shrubs. And for shrubs, that ratio is 10 shrubs per 1,000 square feet of required landscape area. So that's 436 shrubs. And this variance request is to allow a reduced number of shrubs, 104, instead of the 436. To compensate, more trees are provided than is required. The ratio for trees is 1 per 1,000 square feet, so only 44 are required and 72 are proposed. Most of those would be columnar varieties, because most of the landscaping is going to be between a building and that 6-foot perimeter fence. That's one of the reasons that we feel like there are factors that can support the variance request. There's really minimal street frontage, public street frontage, no real public realm or front yard that could really accommodate 436 shrubs. There are shrubs being provided. If you can see the teeny little black dots on this plan, I know it's a reduced version. Those are indicating the locations of shrubs. So in the parking area and around the detention pond, where they would be more visible, at least to the folks that are on the property. As the Commission is aware, there are 9 criteria that we use to evaluate variance requests, and those are analyzed more completely in your staff report, but I'll just review quickly the conclusions that staff has drawn. The variance request does appear to meet a majority of the criteria, so staff is recommending approval of the variance. We feel that the reduced number of shrubs would not alter the character of the area. Because the site, again, has minimal public visibility, the additional shrubs really wouldn't provide a public benefit, and the additional expense may not be in the best interest of the city or the citizens. Finally, staff finds that the variance request would not be detrimental to the public welfare, and the additional trees that are provided are fulfilling the intent of the Architectural and Site Design Manual by providing some screening to neighboring properties. I should also point out that we haven't received any public comment for or against the variance request in the form of a letter or a phone call or anything. Nor have we received comment on the planned building group, which staff is also recommending for approval. We have 2 criteria that we use to evaluate a planned building group, and staff has found that the site plan is compliant with the zoning code, with the public facilities zone district, and is not contrary to the welfare of the neighborhood. We recognize that the facility certainly is a more intensive use than other uses in the area, more residential and rural agricultural uses, but we feel that there has been adequate thought put into buffering and screening as proposed, and staff also believes that the site design is complying where practical with the applicable standards of the Architectural and Site Design Manual. So that concludes this presentation, and again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. At this time, we'll take questions from the commissioners, starting with Commissioner Buckner.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the comprehensive presentation. Just one question about the perimeter landscaping with the columnar trees and the native grasses. Am I to understand then that no hardscaping around the perimeter is planned? It's all going to be planted in some fashion, either with native grasses, xeric shrubs, or other vegetation?
Yeah, that's the intent. If Tim, you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yes, most of the landscaping is going to be behind the buildings that are proposed, except in the northeast corner and around the office building. There we have a more intense landscape, and it will be dressed up. But what we thought make more sense is to intensify the number of trees in that no man's land, that 15 feet between the fence and the building. because no one's going to see that. And if we get native grasses growing back there, we'll be able to mow them and keep that stable. But again, it has no, it's not really an amenity to either us or our neighbors.
Okay, great, thanks.
I would just add, we've given a remarkable amount of thought to the landscaping on this site over the past couple months since we last discussed this in March, and included in the conversation has been the Parks Department, and Margaret Paget is in charge of our forestry division, and she's provided a list of recommended trees. We recognize that the execution of this plan may occur long after we've left, so we do have, we are proposing more of a xeric landscaping plan, and each landscaping plan would have to be reviewed with the associated building as that goes through the permitting process.
Thank you. Commissioner Weaver, any questions?
Yes, I just had a question. If the variance goes through, are you held to the 72 trees? So in other words, if you don't have to put in the 400 shrubs, will you for sure have to do the...
You can make that a condition of your approval.
Okay.
That is the intent, though.
Yeah.
We will be placing those trees, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I should mention it, it's a good question. The planned building group, theoretically, so it would be approved. If it's approved, it gets recorded at the county, and theoretically, any sort of site improvement, landscaping or building or otherwise, would cross-reference back to the original approval, which would show, the number of trees that are required and where those would be located, so.
Yeah, reference.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Matthews, any questions? Okay. Commissioner Duran? Commissioner Ohm?
I guess the first question is, how did you come up with essentially as a tree equivalent? How'd you pick that number?
So there was a couple different approaches. We first thought about what does CDOT use, because we don't have a tree to shrub equivalent in our code, and I believe it's 1 to 4. Or they have a ratio. And then we thought maybe it's more practical to see what the site can sustain as far as distance between trees. And I think that's ultimately how we ended up with 72. Does that sound right, Tim?
Yes, that's correct. We looked at the spacing between the trees, and we wouldn't be able to really plant more than that without them growing together and starving each other out. So that's how we arrived. We came up with the maximum number of trees we thought we could put on the site.
So I think this was asked, but the first thing is there residential on the west side? Is that what's over there?
There is, yeah.
On that far west side, and I see. I guess what's on the northeast side? That's just agricultural, right?
That is agricultural, yep. The property immediately to the east is there are horses that live on that property, and then to the north, I believe, that's a part of a huge property that's been used sort of as undeveloped land and conservation area.
So I guess my question is I would think typically we would want to have, when we have a residential versus agriculture, we would want to have trees buffering the residential, and I don't see any trees on that west side. It's just grass. And then we have a lot of nice trees on the northeast side, which in reality is agriculture. What's the reason of not having the trees on the west side?
You mean, sorry, when you say on the west side over?
That side, yeah.
So the property, if you can sort of vaguely see, the property that's just to the north of the corner, I believe that was when we originally rezoned this portion of the site, there was an arrangement. Do you want to elaborate? Is that the property that we planted trees on their property?
Yes. What happened is some of you may have been here when we built the police evidence building. When we built that, we had proposed a number of trees, and I forgot the number, but they were spaced at about 15 feet all along that northeast or northwest corner of the property. And the neighbor just across our fence to the north, there's a duplex across there, he complained that at Planning Commission that the trees, of course, would be planted on our side of the 6-foot fence and would have very little value to him. And he asked if the city would give him the money and he would put the trees in his backyard on his side of the fence. That was the arrangement approved by Planning Commission, and the city worked with the property owner and paid for him to plant trees on his side. So there are a number of trees. I don't remember the number. It's like 5 or 6 trees. So that met the requirement for landscaping along the police evidence building. And then to further answer your question, if you go to the northerly piece of ground along 46th, there are 2 houses adjacent to our property. And we have proposed 9 or 10 trees along that fence line to their benefit. And then what we've done as far as trying to be a good neighbor and buffering against those property owners, we have the buildings planned there so that any noise we have in the yard will not be a nuisance to them, or less of a nuisance to them, because we'll have the building walls keeping that sound moving to the east rather than to the west.
I think what I was talking about was more in that the building V on the far left.
Oh, on this side?
Yeah.
Sure. This property is also zoned agriculturally, and
That's
I believe.
agricultural, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any security issues with having any trees next to is V the?
What
is V?
Is the police evidence building,
Is there
and
any
they're
issues with having
adjacent
trees next to that, and that's why we can't have the trees?
No, it's not. We do have trees, and they're doing quite well along the west side of the building. They were planted at the same time the neighbor planted the trees just north of our fence on that property. And those are doing quite well. The police evidence building has really no windows, has very tight security, and then there's a compound that has chain link fence that is just to the east of the building and to the south of the building, where the police have impound cars that they need to hold for evidence. And we have not have had any issues with breach of that. We basically, at the police area, we have 2 fences. We have the wood fence with the barbed wire, 3 strands of barbed wire on top, and then we have the police chain link fence with barbed wire on top of it. So there's 2 security fences to protect the police area.
And then, thank you. And then, does the proposed landscape buffer, how does that compare to the landscape requirement for buffers?
Sure. So the setbacks in the public facility district is only 10 feet and then 5 feet for every additional story. Because we don't know everything about all the proposed buildings, we just did a 15-foot buffer all the way around, so it's more than sufficient as far as the zoning code goes.
Okay. And then, I guess we're asking for a variance. Does this set up any type of, I guess, precedent for future development cases?
No, that's a good question. All variances, whether approved administratively by the Planning Commission or the Board of Adjustment, they don't ever set a precedent. Every variance request has to stand on its own merit and meet a majority of those criteria.
Okay.
So case by case.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a question, more of a process question. It appears that this master plan is a long range plan, right? 30+ years. If this document, if the building group document's being recorded, I guess, are we being tied to this particular plan? Meaning, let's say that building A gets built, but then building B, you know what, that doesn't work, and we're not going to build it there. Are we stuck with this layout, or what would be the process to amend this building group in the future?
There is a process to amend it. We do this so infrequently that I don't know it off the top of my head. So you can either answer or I can look it up.
We would take into consideration, the extent of the differences. I mean, we might have to either make an administrative adjustment if it's, kind of close to the intent of what's being proposed, or we'd come back and do an amendment to the plan with Planning Commission. But we've got some administrative flexibility built into it so that we're, not hard and fast,
Okay.
as long as the intent is being met.
That sounds good. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right.
Yeah.
Oh, Commissioner Weaver, no problem.
I had one more question, and this sort of has to do with the previous 2 questions. So on the farthest west side, it's agricultural right now. If it were to go to residential at some point, will those people get to have trees on that side at some point? It looks like there aren't any trees proposed.
It's super hard to see on this image, which is why I pulled out the plan. There's actually an icon on the paper version that's showing there are 3 existing trees right behind the police evidence building and 2 existing trees on the north side. So the only void is really adjacent to this open area. Again, we could amend the plan building group if we needed to, if there was some different sort of development scenario later on. Yeah.
The other thing, too, is we're pretty responsive to the citizenry, and if we were to get a new person who moved there, built a house, started to have issues, we could work with them to try to resolve whatever that might be.
Very good. Thank you.
Try to do some screening.
One more issue on that. The reason there are no trees there today is the city acquired an access easement that runs south to 44th, and that is actually a gravel area for access for the police department to bring vehicles into the evidence area. And so that's why we didn't landscape it, and that's why it was not required when we brought that plan into Planning Commission several years ago.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Thank you very much. Seeing no one in the audience, we assume no one wants to speak in favor or against, so we will entertain a motion on case B, which is the variance case first.
I'll make a motion on the variance. I move to approve case number WA-12-11, request for approval of a 76% variance from the landscape requirement for shrubs on property zoned public facilities and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue for the following reasons. 1, the variance would not alter the essential character of the locality. 2, the unique physical surroundings of the property result in no public visibility of the site. 3, it is not in the best interest of the city or the citizens to commit resources to additional shrubs which render no public benefit. 4, the request would not be detrimental to public safety or welfare. 5, additional trees are proposed for the site to compensate for the reduced number of shrubs and to fulfill the screening guidelines of the Architectural Site and Design Manual. The number of trees, I'll make that part of condition. 6, no protests were registered against the variance request, with the following condition: that the city plant, that the number of additional trees that the city plant will net 72 trees as referenced in the proposed plan rather than the required 44 trees.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion on that particular motion?
Yes. Normally, I think that a city should comply with the rules it enforces on everyone else. And I think this, though, is a unique situation where the perimeter landscaping, I think, actually makes the community better than it would be if they complied with it. So I will be supporting it.
Any other discussion on the motion? One thing that staff did bring to my attention, because this is a variance request through Planning Commission, a supermajority is needed, so 5 affirmative votes as opposed to the simple majority will be required tonight for this passage. So with that in mind, I will call for a vote.
Approved unanimously.
And then I will call for a motion then on the final case of the night, the planned building group.
I'll go ahead and make that motion too. I move to approve case number PBG-12-01, a request for approval of a planned building group on property zoned public facilities and located at 11210 West 45th Avenue for the following reasons. 1, the proposed site plan complies with the zoning code and is not contrary to the general welfare of the immediate neighborhood. 2, the application complies, where practical, with the applicable standards set forth in the Architectural and Site Design Manual. 3, the PBG implements the city-approved Public Works Park Maintenance Master Plan. promoting orderly and efficient development of the site, and enabling a consolidation of the city's maintenance operations at one location.
I second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote.
Motion approved? Okay, unanimously, it's approved.
Thank you very much on those three cases. Any other items tonight from staff?
I don't know if new or old business. We all know the Carnation Festival is this weekend, and we would highly encourage folks to make an attendance. There is the circus going on as well, and sounds kind of exciting. So it's kind of the first thing. The second thing is we want you to know about some staffing issues we've got coming in the next couple months. Kathy Field, who is our administrative assistant, is moving into a different position with Public Works. Karen Scott, who is the Public Works admin assistant here at City Hall, is moving down to the shops building, and Kathy has been hired to take her place. So number one, we're going to have an absence while we try to fill that position. That change will happen September 10th is when things go into effect. The other thing is we try to keep a pretty rigorous, on a staff level, a pretty rigorous zoning code amendment process going, where we identify, certain needs within the zoning code, and then we move forward. The most recent, I think, we talked about the last meeting, or the next meeting, is the employment industrial zone regulations that Sarah's working on, and then also public schools. At the end of September, I'm going to be out on a medical leave for about 6 weeks. And and that combined with Kathy's situation, we're probably going to have to pull back on the zoning code amendments. The next one really slated to be up for discussion is the sign code, and just wanted to give you guys a heads up. We're probably not going to be able to keep that aggressive kind of schedule. We've got Lawrence, the one who's probably going to be in the office solo for a while, and we're going to have to try to keep our heads afloat. So just FYI, we know sign code is important. That's kind of the next one on the list. So we'll try to keep working on it, but it probably won't come forward with anything succinct until probably November. So just she says at the earliest. So. And she does really a lot. She works for the Housing Authority. She can do accounting. She's going to be a really hard person to fill that void. So, like I say, you have a little patience, and we'll get through it. So,
Thank you for that update. We will miss Kathy. Any commissioner business? Any announcements or anything from our side? Okay.
How about the 38th Avenue updates?
38th Avenue, the improvements have been in place for a while. If you haven't been out there today, they have embellished the kind of the old planters with the pictures, the fine art pictures, which I think is really effective. We're real excited about it. And of course, we sort of get our debut with the whole parade on Saturday. So that'll be exciting to see that. The bad news is one of the pop-up cafes got hit last Wednesday, and we are looking at ways to try to get that traffic control a little bit more so people understand where things are going. We're also going to shift that one hopefully a little bit further after the parade. But so still working through. We do have the grand opening we're looking at, which is tentatively scheduled for September 22nd, and that's a Saturday, and it should be a pretty cool thing. So, go ahead.
And the next phase of 38th Avenue is considering a quarter-wide rezoning to mixed-use commercial. So we did have a neighborhood meeting. An invitation as you're aware, zone change requires a neighborhood meeting where you invite anyone within 600 feet. So the invitee list was about 1,500 people. We had about 50 show up, so it was a good meeting. Not everybody, but we do have public hearings scheduled in front of Planning Commission in September. I'm not going to remember the date.
I think it's the 6th, but that might not be right, but
I think it's the first meeting in September, yep. And then potentially to City Council then in October.
Meredith, was anybody injured in that pop-up cafe incident? Which one was it? Oh, okay. Good. All right. Yeah. Well, people are still getting used to that orientation, I think. And that's... Well, and that particular one is right where it's like right after all of the lanes transition into that single lane in each direction. So it's sort of a challenging spot. I'm glad nobody was hurt.
Is it anticipated that the mass rezoning along 38th will include an opt-out provision for the property owners? Yes? Okay.
Jersey Berry?
Any other commission business questions? Okay. Call for an adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
I second.
Vote, please. Okay.
Unanimous.
Very good. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.